Good evening. I just want to have open dialogue. I used to hear the term, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. Mom's got it. Dad's got it. Everything's going to be okay. And I've heard that term multiple times. Throughout my life, I've heard everything's going to be okay. So then it started making me wonder, I've even heard politicians say, everything's going to be okay. So then I started thinking, who's in the this might not work out for you group? Who's that group? If everyone is saying everything's going to be okay, who is in the, hey, this might not work out for you group? That's kind of where it is. It brought me to a thought process like, is there anywhere in the Constitution where it says that we need to stand up against a tyrannical government if that government isn't working? It does not explicitly state that anywhere in the Constitution. These are things that are gleaned, that are based on interpretation of the Constitution. Here's an example. The right to rebel against a tyrannical government isn't explicitly stated in the U.S. Constitution, but there are some clauses and amendments that can be interpreted as supporting that idea. So there are people who actually believe in this, who actually say, hey man, if things get too bad, we're going to have to tear this place down. We're going to have to tear this down. Here's an example. The Second Amendment. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms, which some view as a safeguard against potential government tyranny. It allows citizens to own firearms, which could be used in a scenario of extreme government oppression. There are people who believe that the government is overstepping. Let's take Arizona, for instance. Arizona seems to have passed a very strict abortion ban today. If you go look at the 2020 census, it says that women have more population in America than men. Yet there are a lot of laws being targeted to take away a lot of women's rights. So you have women that are saying, hey, Arizona, y'all out here tripping. So we're about to vote you out. And now you have men touting things like, we need to take away women's right to vote altogether. Where did this come from? That's, what is going on? Now you got the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment reserves powers not delegated to the federal government, to the states and the people. This can be interpreted as leaving the right of revolution with the states or the people as a last resort. This means somebody has said that if things get too bad, we need the people to stand up and do something about it. The problem is everybody's going to pick sides. And it's not going to be us against the government. It's going to be us against us, because that's who you deal with. You argue with individuals who are either voting red or voting blue or whatever other color that they're going to throw on the back of, whatever's going to happen. Whatever that is. But it keeps on being your neighbor that you seem to have the biggest issue with. But we're not seeing our neighbor pass any laws. Our neighbor just has an opinion about the laws that are being passed. We are seeing a minority group, i.e., our representatives, pass laws that are affecting all of us in sometimes very negative manners. Now, here's what's interesting. They talk about the concept of consent of the governed. The underlying philosophy of the U.S. government is based on the consent of the governed. This implies that the people have the right to withdraw their consent if the government becomes tyrannical. How many of you feel like you can just say, no, I don't want to do that, and that's okay? How many of you feel like, hey man, I'm just going to not do it, and you don't think that like somebody's going to show up to enforce some level of authority that tells you that you are going to do what you don't think that you're going to be able to do? Now get this. There is no legal framework outlining the process of revolution. It's a complex historical and philosophical concept. This means that everybody who thinks about revolution, they're coming up with it as they go. They have seen something, read something, heard something, watched something that has influenced them to build an idea of how they want something to be. And they need to tear something down to implement theirs. That's where we are. Check this one out. The Declaration of Independence. While not part of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence mentions the right of the people to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. The founding fathers were very familiar with tyranny from British rule, which influenced their creation of a government with checks and balances to prevent such abuse of power. This is the entire reason I'm telling you to vote for me for governor and receive legislative authority. Educate yourself on what can be done and start to ask yourself, who is in the group that it might not work out for? $400 used to be a lot of money to buy groceries for an entire month. I know it because I have lived it. Everybody who is anybody today knows $400, it's barely lasting you a week and a half, if that, based on how many people are in your household. When you see these people asking all the right questions, and the follow-up question is, well, now that you've asked these questions and you got them on the ropes, what's next? There's no authority to do anything about these individuals because they are not held accountable. They're not held accountable. And if you notice, they never ever answer that question about how come they can sit up here and tell you that they can't answer these questions or something to that nature and why that's okay. No one ever points you to, well, why is that okay? Because it's a law out there. It's a reason. It's a policy. It's a structure in place that simply says that, yeah, we can ask you all the questions we want to. You don't have to answer them, and you don't, and you will not be held accountable. But there is this feeling we get like, yeah, you really got them on the ropes and you're asking all the right questions, but there is no accountability. None whatsoever. This is why legislative authority needs to be put back in the hands of the people. This is why I want to be a governor of a state. I want to be a governor of a state that understands that, hey, when we get out of control, that the citizens need to check and balance us. And the only way to do that is to give the citizens legislative authority and watch it evolve. And it will evolve. It'll start with, hey, if this bill doesn't work or you don't like this bill doesn't get passed, and it will evolve. It will evolve because the people will start to recognize the authority behind their teachings. You'll start to worry about the authority behind what you're learning, what you're involved in. You will feel accountable for how this stuff works because the questions got to start being asked. Am I in a group that it might not work out for? Is that me? Do I feel like there are more people that it might not work out for than it is working out for? And if that's the case, what can we do if we're in the majority that it's not working out for? You can vote for representatives that want to put the power in your hands and stop voting for people that tell you that they got all the answers. That's ridiculous. You got all the answers for some 300 million people? You absolutely do not. Because there are too many instances in different cases out there. This is common sense. There was 7 million people in Florida in 2020. You think there's a single representative that has 7 million people? Thoughts? That's doing the right thing for 7 million people every single time? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. 7 million of y'all need to be able to say, yeah, we good with this, or no, we're not. That's what it means. So if you're giving the patriotic conversation, have it and say that, hey, what we're missing is the checks and balances piece so that we can make sure that if you're still asking us to be educated in this society, that we're doing the right things to help the society and not just leaving it in the hands of a few that are hurting a lot of people. If you're in the "this might not work out for me" group. You guys have a great evening. Thank you very much.